Hello, all. I am back in my little office, not in the pickup today. Even though I did actually record one yesterday while on a drive back from some meetings in Minnesota and Iowa, but let's just say I got off course kind of as driving, and there's things going on, even though it was like a straight beeline into the north where I live. But before I get into kind of the main thought of the week, a few little beginning thoughts, as I usually do. For one, with some of my meetings, met with some old colleagues and talking about a lot of stuff. Some of what has been transpiring in my own life. But there's just some interesting things you learn too. Stories of people overspending and making weird decisions, and then even people basically the essence of GPS in ag and auto steer was based on seemingly someone giving a copy of something to someone else that wasn't supposed to, and nothing really happened from it. That's a whole nother story in itself. I don't. That was a big holy crap moment, but that's something else. Anyways, so what I gathered from some of my talks got me into this kind of subject of vaporware in ag, and it's kind of everyone kind of knows this is a thing, as there's been a lot of promises of making this thing, or turning big data into this. Hey, let's bring blockchain into the equation and do this so we can track everyone's data, where it came from, blah blah blah. Oh, now there's other pieces to this, but then it's, oh, we're going to bring AI into it all. And all this is great and fine, and some of that has progressed into reality instead of just a dream, a simple cloud in the sky, just staring at it, hoping to create it. Some of it has come together. Some at an enormous cost, where no one got value from it, but then someone picked up the pieces and kind of created something from it. Some of it just took a shit ton of money and time to get closer to some of these realities. Um, in any realm, it seems we're always chasing this elusive goal in the kind of tech world of ag, which is natural. I mean, this is, every industry does this. It's nothing new. While vaporware is more of a term that comes from software, because of how it works. You're building things in the cloud and whatnot. Certain vehicles and physical things were vaporware for their days. Uh, I'm trying to even think of an example off the top of my head, and oh, have a meal in a pill or something like that. Thing you see on the Jetsons. Which honestly, there's with some of the types of supplements and vitamins, I'm not saying they're good for you either. You might just piss them all out, but um, there's an extent of those things that exist. We're not there, not fully there. Of course, now we're taking pills and drugs that suppress how much we want to eat. So maybe it's kind of this circle of maybe that's more of the pill we need than the pill to fill our bellies, is to, because we have plenty of food. We've fed the world to a point. You know, Clearly people are starving, and that's terrible. And that could be fixed through various methods, which that's a whole nother conversation once again. But when it comes to just the vaporware idea in the ag tech space, precision ag space, there's a few things I wanted to talk about with that, and part of it's also this lead up. So, I maybe should have mentioned this earlier, but so there's Ag Tech Week in my area of the world in Fargo, North Dakota. So there's a bunch of meetups and there's a conference and all that stuff, and I'm actually going to be either doing this live during the Cultivate conference next Thursday on the 12th, and just kind of people come in to like a booth area and we're just going to record crap and talk about stuff. Kind of the feeling when you're at a conference and sure there's people talking, there's people on stage and all that's fine, but a lot of the real conversations happen in the back. That's what I'll be doing, but we're going to put it on this stage. So I kind of wanted to lead up with a little bit of that because there's going to be a lot of, hey, we're wanting to build this. We're going to try to build this. There's going to be, startups there, investors, businesses like, we would like this. We'd like this. We're trying to reach to this. We want to build this. I want to change this, create this, provide this opportunity. Once again, all is great. That's how everything works. You got to start with an idea, a concept, and hope for the best. You got to convince somebody else to help you create it, or you got to help yourself to create it. And we're all guilty of dreaming too much, coming up with the idea before really thinking about the reality of the situation. I'm just as guilty as anybody else on that. I've had countless ideas, and I've talked to colleagues about, if we just built this, we just did this, I just had this. Now I catch myself usually. I don't go down the rabbit hole as deep as I used to, though. There also is a ton of opportunity to go down a little bit of a rabbit hole in the ag tech world, because let's be honest, we haven't solved everything. Even with a bunch of money and people, we haven't solved as much as we hoped. We did create a lot of vaporware or versions, whatever the next level past vaporware is like. Yeah, we kind of created something based on that idea, but we really didn't create what we said we were going to create. We used that idea as a trope to get interest, to get people to sign up, to get users, to get someone to pay something so that we could get to that idea. And then a lot of what happened is, that either got some traction, helped raise some money, got some clients in, but then a lot of groups kind of just got stuck right there. And then some asked for more money. It's like, yeah, we're still trying to get to what we said we were going to do and our achievable goals, but all this stuff is tough and hard. And I think the dream kind of got in the way of people actually thinking through and planning how these things actually come together. So we need to do better at that. The ag tech world has been actually not good at that at all. It's been very bad at it. The countless solutions of, let's look at one area that's maybe more new, that's gotten a lot of hype, with, carbon credits and CI scores and all that. Now, why this happens is not necessarily because people are just like, collectively like, oh my God, we should just do this. No, there's something else kind of pushing the needle, a little deeper into the skin. And of course, that was the previous administration and kind of the nature of what's likely, environmental sustainability stuff, all that. And, it only takes one saying, like, we're going to put money into this, and that's what's going to happen. The government, or we're pushing industry, and then industry's like, yeah, we want that because, we want our government money or our sport or something. And it just creates this trickling effect. Of course, now you have, some of the AI and LLM things have kind of pushed that. It's like, hey, we're putting a bunch of money into this. These giant groups. It's like the next internet and all this. And so people are like, yeah, we're going to do that, and pushing kind of vaporware to do all that. And The next one could be, and the idea of, this make America healthy again, the Maha movement. It's not necessarily none of these things are like bad things to pursue and things to solve. They are inherently things to progress towards. Like, that's okay. It's that we just kind of wait for what's that thing that everybody's talking about. And then we build that and we say, well, we're going to build it this way. We're going to build it this way. Once again, that's just kind of how things work too. Though we just got to be really careful. And investors that want to come in and help these groups with these big ideas need to be really careful that they're not just supporting vaporware, not just ideas, that the people involved are actually capable of building these things, that they actually understand the nuance and the niches and the in-betweens. Because a lot of what was going on, I feel, was just people giving money to people with ideas, not with understanding and background and expertise. Now, some of that was happening. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of smart people in this world that I talk about that have done great things, built things out of nothing and have progressed. Maybe they got acquired, and whether it worked well or not, they still built it and still did something and still provided some value. Hence why they got acquired. Of course, from there, that's a whole other thing of why maybe it doesn't continue as well when someone buys something else. Passion, and there's other clients, there's other products that need to be sold. So that's a hard thing in itself, to fit kind of the idea of what you're trying to buy or invest in and actually turn it into something. This is all how the world works. What I'm hoping, though, is, I've talked about, we're kind of in this next stage. The first years, call it, I don't know, 10, 15 years, depending on where you started in it, in kind of the precision ag world, was more, really, it was really focused strictly on making applications more precise, more accurate, more efficient. Variable rate, auto steer, section control, these base elements. And then after that, it was like, okay, these base elements are creating information. And for my world, more satellites, more imagery, more sensors come up. So you got to do something with that data. People want to do more data with things that are happening from section control, and then things on the planners. And then, where are you applying? What does that mean? What's the effect of that? So you get into the data play. That's been the kind of the second stage, was more about data and turning it into something of value. So we had kind of the application, we had the data. Now we have what? The idea was turning the data into, insights and ROI value. Well, it's kind of been done. That's trickier. It's one thing with something like AutoSteer, you kind of just press a button and it does what it does. That's the result. Once you get data, there's not a lot you can do to press a button and say, well, now there's this, and this field's different than that field, and this crop is different than that crop, this variety is different than that variety. What the farmer did on that field, even if it's the same variety and crop and chemical used, is that land is different than this land. And that farmer is farming it differently than that farmer. Even if they have the exact same equipment, they're still doing it differently. And I think we got kind of lost thinking we could figure that out. And we ran away from actually still finishing doing the application really well. We kind of just dropped that off the mark to a point. It got better, but there's areas of it that kind of got a little lax. I look at more of variable rate because I kind of grew up around that and using data to create prescription maps and stuff. We almost made it, because we had more data, made it more complicated to do that instead of just actually getting someone to do it and get used to it. Get used to the procedures, to the process, without overcomplicating it, saying there is some data here. Let's create it simple, do it simple, think about it in a simple format versus just kind of the stationary composite way. Let's just do a little more. we were on a good trend, and then it was like, well, you've created all this data, so now we have to like turn it up into all these other crazy things because now we know. Well, we maybe knew in a small world area. Scaling that is tough. Bringing that out there is really tough. We kind of just jumped to something else. So in this kind of call it third phase of technology and ag, the next 10 years, we'll just call it. Maybe it'll be 15, maybe it'll be 20. I don't know. We're kind of rumbling around well, what to do. Well, okay, what are the new things that are, like I said earlier, being talked about? We've created enough food. We've increased production through all these different means. Well, now we need to create more quality, better, trace it better, show where it's from. And we can use data to do that. And that's fine. That's needed. It's been done too, to various degrees. It has. But there's this want to do more of it. And then you bring in, AI things that say, well, we can now build what took us $1 million before, we can build for 100 grand now, or something like that, because it's just a more efficient process to test code and do things like that and run scenarios and connect matrices of data together. And I mean, you saw that's possible. Yes, you can test the possibility of it on a smaller scale, and then somewhere like, we're running this giant model throughout the world, and now we know we took enough soil samples here and enough data on those soil samples that in this area now we can model it for the globe. Well, anyone that tells you that is, I don't know. It depends what you're trying to get out of it. If you're trying to get something field level from modeling it that way, I don't know. I think you're stretching the truth and you're pushing vaporware because that isn't as simple as one might think. Macro analytics are actually easier to come up with because you don't need the granularity. You're not as much worried about that. But what some will do is take that kind of macro analytical view with that vaporware. Oh, we can do this and this and this. Here's that dream. And then they get this bigger data set model. And they're like, well, now we can push it down to the field level and that'll be accurate. Well, it could be to a point, but does it spatially take in how that individual farmer is doing things, or that agronomist is doing things, or that local ag retailer is doing things, or whatever, name all these other people involved into the process. And a lot of times it's not. My world in satellite imagery is a great example of this. Because it's everywhere. You got history, you got time. It's taken fairly often. It's one of the hardest data sets. It's, if not the hardest data set globally in agriculture to really work with, because there's so much of it. There's so much things you can do with it and decipher from it. But it has limits. And many didn't understand those limits, but talked about it in this vaporware way. Well, it can do this. We can do yield prediction everywhere. We can know every crop that's growing everywhere all the time because the data tells us, and this model told us to do it, this way and work this way through some beautiful algorithm. And well, it doesn't do that very accurately for everything. It can do it accurately for certain things if the timing's right and the crops are in the right stages and it's in the same area of the world. Like, yeah, you can do pretty well at it. But if you're modeling it everywhere and then sucking it down, that's harder. Now, if you put an asterisk behind it, it's like, well, this is just an assumption. Sure. Is that valuable enough for somebody? On a large scale, that might be valuable enough for somebody. But for a farmer, that's probably not valuable enough. They want, high accuracy. And they also have different nuance. They have their own data. But then they're scared to use that because of all this other stuff. So we're getting caught in this cycle of wishful thinking. Oh, we could build this because in a small world, you can do it. And they say, well, AI can get us to scale it. Oh, now we need, we can make food healthy everywhere. Well, no, you can't. Doritos are going to be Doritos, whether you like it or not. Um, People are going to eat a lot of bacon, whether you like it or not. People are going to cook things like fries in oil, whether you like it or not. Some things, while you can make a little better, nutrient density things. Yes, you can. These things exist. They are true. They can happen. You can. The process itself is maybe not vaporware to track it on this level, to do things on this level. It's when we talk about it at scale, that's the hard thing. That is the really hard thing. For just I'll bring as an example for ourselves, like, while we were dealing with satellite imagery, we actually were more focused on trying to scale it. While many others, and fine by this, were just trying to take data in for their area and their world and using it in their world and doing things there. And some, it's the same result maybe at times, or maybe it's a little different nuance, and that's fine. But scaling is harder. It takes a lot more oomph. It takes a lot more strategy and thought processes, and the business models are harder. And I'm not saying we solved that problem or anything. We were going for it. We were trying, still trying to bring that to a level, but doing it in one way. There are other ways to do it too, and others are doing that, and that's fine and great. People do things different ways, but you also have to realize that doing those things, you can also scale things and do a really crappy job at it. That's the other part of it. Maybe you can scale the general process, but actually delivering a good result at scale, that's the real tough thing. Look at something like Apple. Clearly we created this MP3 player. There was others that existed, but they made it nice to use. Okay, that's great. They still had to scale that everywhere and create all these other subsystems to get you music everywhere, and with all the different groups out there, all the different music artists and labels, like there's all this other stuff, and that takes a crap ton of things to happen. Well, crap ton of money. One of the most valuable company on the planet. Of course, they're huge. They're giant. They're dynamic. If you look in the ag world, yes, John Deere's trying to follow that model, and they're doing well on that to their degree. They don't do everything great on the ag tech front. They do their part well in their world, which is common in a lot of people's worlds, but they don't do imagery great. They let others do it, for varying degrees. They don't do maybe soil analysis great. They get others to doing that. So maybe we have to think more in that way too, because I think in the last 10 years, a lot of money is like, we can do everything in one thing. Well, the mega software that solves everyone's problems, we have all the answers, one platform. So because farmers are complaining that they want everything in one place. Well, that's impossible. Can't do that. It doesn't work. There is no one software to be all. Now, some are getting more in the lines of closeness to sort of being that way. For example, what I said, John Deere kind of that way. Apple on the global scale of people. Yeah, it's got phone, app store, and all that. Yeah, but that stuff it's really, really hard. So we have to build the things that are actually possible for what we have, and not just create vaporware on this large problem. Like, we're going to solve what you're going to do on your field with chemicals by AI, and we can do it everywhere because we have the chemical database, and we can, if you know what your crop it is, we know what it is. Yeah, well, yeah, cool. But you also need to take into fact the type of machines and the crops and the crop types and the timing and the weather and areas. and what else they're doing, what other crops are nearby to really effectively do it the best way. And there's more to it. So all that being said, from the people that want to use whatever's created, to the investors that want to invest in something to create it, to the groups that want to acquire someone that has created something, just make sure you're not just buying vaporware. And if you are buying into a future idea, which is not a terrible thing necessarily, some groups are more capable of solving that problem. Maybe that's why it was acquired. That's why it's invested into. That's fine. That's good, actually. That's how it should work. Still try to understand what the other pieces are that are needed to actually get there. Instead of just buying into the idea, it needs to be understood what it'll actually take to do that. What are the time frames? How much it'll cost? The type of people you need. And while groups are trying to do that, everyone needs to know that. And that's what I've been talking about, this kind of toxic relationship, even with ag tech and farmers. And like I said, farmers need to understand that they might be told, hey, we're going to come out with something that helps you sell grain more effectively, and you're going to make 30 cents more a bushel or something. And it's like, cool, great. And they get like, oh, it doesn't work, or it didn't work the way I want to do. Blah, 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 blah. Well, part of it is they didn't try to understand why, or maybe they do. They maybe don't know how to illustrate it, and the group that's selling it to them doesn't know how to illustrate it from their point of view. So this is to everybody. We all just need to do better at these dreams and these ideas that we have. We need substance, and we have to understand why all these things are built and generally how they come out. Because then here's another factor to this, and I'll kind of end here. Well, okay, someone knows how to do it. The investors are trusting of them. Find the right people. All these other pieces fit. Say we're going to build this, vaporware, but we got the right people. We got the right structure. Well, there's kind of two ways to do it. And maybe I'm thinking then there's a hybrid way, I suppose. You can create your own dedicated IP that you create yourself. It's custom, it's unique, because that thing is custom and unique. You can't just find some pre-made solution and kind of plug these things together necessarily. Of course, some things you can kind of do that. You can grab these other services, meld them together, and there's actually there's systems that bring that in. I think of all the different my John Deere is a great example of this. There's all these other app solutions, and it's like they feed into here, and then they're here, but John Deere doesn't necessarily take all the data from all those things and then put them in here and say, we all rubbing it together, and then here's this perfect thing. They're not doing that. They're saying, we're just bringing things in here. And it's like using a bunch of individual other stacks. So to do that, to bring all those other things maybe together, they would have to create some unique IP to put that together. So, there's these different levels of developing things. And in most cases, it's really just a hybrid of it. You're using other base end solutions, and maybe it's open source, maybe it's paid by a license, who knows? It just depends. And then you have to create some unique IP to kind of connect things and bring them together and then provide your thing. Of course, I will say there was some groups in the ag tech world that didn't really create much unique IP, maybe the illusion of what it was. And that's been part of the issue too, is because they needed to reach that vaporware thing they were trying to do, and that idea, and it was the money was put into the idea, not into the process of how it's done, not the understanding, just the idea. That's really what this comes down to, is we need to not just invest into the idea or the dream of what the vaporware is. We need to invest in who and how it is done and the reality of creating that, instead of just the idea. Because we can think of 1,000 ideas, and anybody can have them. I'm going to create this perfect app that predicts this and this and this, and I'm going to use an AI, and I'm going to use this. Cool. How are you actually going to do that? Who is helping you do that? Who's involved? We need to do better at that so that the end result can be better. So that vaporware just doesn't continue to keep on being the stream. It's fine that it exists, but we need more reality and understanding of how these things exist. This pushes back to other things. So, with all that said, some more things to think about. And these are things I'm going to be talking about with all these people that I'll meet next week and colleagues in the ag tech world in Fargo Ag Tech Week. There's Grand Farms nearby. I've talked about that. They're part of it. They've kind of put it all together, and then all these other local groups coming together. And I'm helping on certain things, speaking on some panels, and then there's the Ag Tech Alchemy guys. They were kind of closing out the day on next Thursday, and we're having that at a local watering hole that I met my wife at. Met a lot of friends over the years. And a good friend of mine actually owns it now, and he ran it for years, and now he owns it from back home. So it'll be kind of fun. So if you're in the area, stop by, shake my hand. I'll shake yours. I'm going to be running some sort of variants of this podcast with some people this time, not just me. I'll get back a little bit to that. And what I do with those interviews and talks, I'm not sure yet. I'm just going to basically set this camera on record. I'm in this lobby hallway. I'm going to sit there and I'm just going to tell people to come over and say something. Some of it will be the speakers. Some will just be randoms. Some might just be new people that are just like staring at me. What are you doing? And I'm just sitting there like, oh, come over here and let's talk. What's your world like? Maybe we'll grab some others in. There's some cool things I want to do too. Here's the thing. I'll close on this. I have a weird goal of getting one person to sit down and another person to sit down, and I'm going to come up with an idea of how they can work together, and I'm going to give them 1 minute to figure out a deal and close a deal so they can help each other. It's a crazy idea. I mean, clearly all this other crap in the back end hinders the work anyways, but it'll be fun. So if you're in the area, stop by. If you're not going to be, I guess, look forward to however I put that out. I might put a live stream out and then it'll turn into, other podcasts or something over time. Probably should do that anyways. I'm going to try to do that at Tech Hub Live in Des Moines somehow. I got to talk to them. Anyways, so if one of you are listening from Meister, yeah, let's figure that out. Anyways, vaporware shouldn't just be a dream. Let's make it into reality. Let's get some shit done. That's it for this week for the Ag Uncensored podcast. Thanks for listening. Share, like, do all the fun stuff you're supposed to do. And we'll see you next time. Thanks again.